There's a question that potential clients ask photographers all the time. And that question is, are you going to edit my photos? Now, the short answer is yes. The long answer is a bit more complicated than that. So what do we mean by editing exactly? Well, basically, editing just means you're going to make some sort of change to the image. Now, the problem arises when the client and the photographer have two different ideas of what editing is supposed to be. It can happen where the client thinks they're going to do a complete full retouch and make the image look totally finished with beautiful color grading and everything, whereas the photographer just thought they were going to do a few tweaks for contrast, saturation, things like that for the client to look at to figure out what they want to do with the photos afterward. So, to simplify things, let's make things more complicated. What we're going to do is just basically look at what editing could possibly mean to help avoid some possible conflicts in the future. So, editing, the way I see it, can be broken down into 4 different things. It can be culling the images, which is when you go through them to get rid of the ones you don't want to deal with. It can be correcting, which is when you make adjustments, global adjustments to a set of images for things like contrast, color, white balance, stuff like that. It can be retouching, which is when you make selective edits creatively to specific photos, burning and dodging, maybe fixing teeth, things like that, any kind of skin work. And then you got color grading, which is when you give the image its final finished look. Editing can be any one of those things or any combination of them. So you can see how it might be a bit confusing for some people when they have different ideas of what editing could be. The client might come back and say, "You didn't edit these photos at all." When the photographer's thinking, "What do you mean? I spent hours editing them." That's because they had 2 completely different ideas of what editing should be. So, let's break these down first and go over what each of these things are in more detail. Culling is something every photographer will do on every set of images. It's basic. Basically, you go through the images, you pick the ones you want, the ones you want to work with, the ones you feel comfortable presenting to a client, and then you eliminate all the others. Just delete them, remove them from the final set. The reason you do this is because, for example, if you shoot a wedding, clients don't want to sit through 6,000 images. You don't want them to sit through 6,000 images, half of which are out of focus, bad exposures, experiments didn't work anyways, right? So you're going to cull them. You're going to reduce the set down to a certain number that you're comfortable presenting the clients with that won't make their eyes pop out of their head because they have to look through too much. Next, we move on to correcting. This is something every photographer should do on all their images as well, because the images that come directly out of the camera aren't finished images. They can't be. The camera can't be perfect. Getting it right in camera is just a thing people say, but you can't actually do that because the camera can't get it right. You're going to have color issues here and there. You're going to have images that are flat, especially if you shoot in RAW. They're going to be dull. They're going to need some tweaks done to them. So correcting is where you fix all these little things that the camera can't do. It's where you adjust the brightness, you make the images punchier, add a bit more contrast maybe, you make sure the white balance is correct, the color balance is correct. So the images are in a state that I refer to as a proof state. They're ready to be shown to the client, so the client can look at them and decide which ones they want to carry forward with them to the next step, which is where things get creative. Correcting is a bit more of a mechanical process. It can be applied in batches. It's mostly just sliders. Retouching is where things get more artistic. The photographer starts to go over each photo one at a time to make it perfect in terms of all those little technical imperfections on a local level. This is where you'll do things like burning and dodging. It's where you'll smooth out skin tone. You'll, if you're good at it, you'll use frequency separation to do all kinds of manipulations to the image. Smoothing out skin, as I said. You're going to want to deal with stray hairs. Adding or removing objects, especially if you're dealing with composites. This is all retouching. Basically, retouching is anything that doesn't fall into one of the other 3 categories. The final category, this is what we call color grading. It's where we give the image its final finished look. It can be as simple as black and white even, because black and white is just removing color. You're manipulating it in the sense that you're removing it. It can also be adding certain warm tone to the image or a cool tone by creatively adjusting the white balance of the image to give a certain look. If you're trying to mimic a sunset, for example, you might warm up the image so that the whites aren't neutral anymore as they technically should be if you want to make things mathematically correct. They have a warmish glow to them. What a lot of people do is they'll also split tone, which is where you might add two different types of color balance to the dynamic range of the image. You'll tone your highlights one color, and then you'll tone your shadows another complementary color, so they offset each other. This is where you give your image whatever final artistic look you want to achieve whatever you had in mind. And of course, editing can be any of these things, or all of them, or any combination thereof. So what's important to do is talk with your client to make sure that you and they have the same idea in mind of what's considered to be editing, so that there are no problems and no confusion afterward. All right, that's it for today. You know what to do if you like this video. Comment down below, like the video, remember to subscribe, share it to all your friends, make sure your grandmother and your dog both know about it, and you'll see me next time.